Hello class, this is the chord symbol master tutorial. So regardless of which notation program you're using, you should watch this video. We'll be covering some of these concepts in a quiz coming very soon. So look at Gary Lindsay's page 28, and what we're going to do here is we're just going to spell these chords in three different keys. We'll do C always, and then we'll pick two more sort of at random here. So let's get started here. We've got our major triads, and we'll start with C, as I mentioned a moment ago. These will all be in treble clef. So we're gonna do them like this. We're gonna lay them out kind of on their side also. Okay, so root 3, 5, just as you'd expect there. Okay, let's do a couple other ones. Let's do A flat major. Okay, and I really don't need to say major afterwards if it's just a major triad. So we've got our A flat and our C and our E flat, right? It's an A flat major triad. All right, and then let's do one on the sharp side. Let's do D. So we've got D. I'll lay it on its side again, F sharp and A. Okay, so root 3, 5, like so. Okay, major triads. All right, so we then have our major 7 chords. We can do that, and we've got major 7 chords. All right, remember not to use the /7 unless you're playing in a polka band. All right, so starting with C major 7 here, so we've got our major triad at the bottom per Lindsay, right? C, E, G, B natural. And then let's do E flat major 7. So that's going to be E flat, G, B flat, D natural. And let's say A major 7. Okay, so we'll do it in we'll do it in this octave down here. Okay, so our low A, C sharp, E, they're just major triads with the natural 7 or major 7 on top, right? So from C major 7, E flat major 7, A major 7. That's what those three chords sound like. All right. Then we've got our major 9s, very similar to the major 7, except we add the 9th on top. And you know, sometimes people come into jazz, pop, commercial music wondering, well, what's this 9? You know, isn't that the same thing as a 2? Yeah, it is. So what I always tell people is just to remember that you're adding or subtracting 7 when you've got these upper extensions. So a 9, if you don't know what that means, you can just subtract, you know, 7 from that, and then you go, oh, it's just the second scale degree that we're talking about here. All right, so we've got C major 9, we'll do that. We'll just do an F major 9, and then we'll do an E major 9. All right, so we've got our C, E, G. Okay, we got a major 7, plus we're extending it by 1. There's that major 9 chord. And then we've got our F major triad, F major 7, adding the 9 or second scale degree, and then the E major 9, E, G sharp, B, D sharp, F sharp, just like so. All right, so we've got the lovely sounds of just a little more color than the major 7 chord. All right, moving on, we've got our 6 chords. Now, as I mentioned in the tutorials, with these 6s, they're kind of an odd bird in the sense that usually when you see a number coming right after a letter like this, like C7, like C9, like C13, those are all, of course, dominant chords, right? But with a 6 after the number, or actually the rare case of a 5 after a number, those are not dominant chords. There's no lowered 7th in those. So since we're clear on that, let's go ahead and spell some 6 chords. So we'll start with the C6, and we'll do an E flat 6, and we'll do let's do an F sharp 6. All right, so building these guys, just a major triad plus the 6th scale degree. And then we've got, you know, and it's kind of an old school sound. In the Sibelius tutorial, I think as I mentioned, this is sort of like a 1940s vocal group sound, like you'd expect to hear if you know the song Mr. Sandman. You'd expect to hear these voicings. Okay, so we've got our E flat major triad plus the C there, and then for the F sharp 6, F sharp, that's supposed to be an A sharp, C sharp, and a D sharp. Okay, so those guys sound like this. There's our C6. There's our E flat 6. Okay, again, it's got that really unique, distinct sound to it. All right, so we're done with those ones. Moving on to the 6/9 chord. This is a fun one. And you know, the way I learned this was, you know, it doesn't have the 7th in it. I learned what's called a miracle voicing from a gentleman named Frank Mantooth. He has a great book on jazz keyboard, and I always thought it was cool just to play descending fourths. I just always thought that was such a neat sound. These are all 6/9 chords. They're not in root position, obviously. You know, the root is up here on the top, but we've got our 3rd, 6th, our 2nd or 9, the 5th, and our root there. Okay, but again, there's no 7 in there, so we don't get that extra bite. It's a really open kind of sound. And we usually voice this in sort of an open manner, but for now we're just going to stack them. So we've got our C, 6/9, an A flat, let's say 6/9, and let's say a G 6/9. And again, really common to see this slash between those two numbers. It doesn't have to be there. You could write it like that. All right, so C 6/9. So we've got our C, E, G. There's no B natural. There is an A in there, and there is a D in there. Okay, and then the A flat 6/9, A flat, C, E flat, F, that's the 6th, and then a B flat. Okay, and then the G 6/9, we've got G, okay, the major triad. You know, it could very well be that the 9 is fitting right here. It could be that we put it there. So I'll just put an A in parentheses down there. So 6th, and there's the 9. Okay, so we played some examples of that just a moment ago. Or A flat, G 6/9. Okay, again, no 7th gives it that nice open sound. All right, so moving onward to the C7. I'm getting into dominant chords here, the lowered 7. So C7, let's say F7, and A7. All right, so again, just a major triad with that lowered 7th on top. F, A, C, E, A, C sharp, E, and it's a G natural. It's a good idea to review your key signatures if you're having any hang-ups with this, like, oh, why wasn't that a G sharp? Well, if it were an A major 7, then it would be a G sharp, right? But since we're lowering that 7th, it becomes flat scale degree number 7, just like with this E flat right down here, that is scale degree flat 7, okay? So those 3 chords back to back. It's sort of a funky urbane sound. I mean, it's the basis of the blues, really. C7. Okay. That's the sound of the dominant 7 chord. All right, moving on. You know what? We can just extend these all by 1 for the 9. So I don't need to rewrite that. I'm just going to convert these. And now we've got this additional tone, D here, a G for the F9, and for the A9, a B natural. Okay, so that kind of completes that, and it's just adding a little bit more color, right? play this down an octave because my tablet's in the way. All right, that's the sound of those chords. Moving to the 13. All right. Oh, this is important. So when we've got a dominant 13 chord, first of all, you know, it is a dominant chord. But you might expect that the 11th would be in there somewhere because, well, that's, you know, that's inclusive up to the 13th. But actually, no. That's a very special condition. We are not going to include the 11th or the 4th scale degree in any of these 13th chords, all right? And part of that is because of the half-step rub that's generated there. You know, if I were to come on my keyboard here and I wanted to play, say, you know, a C 13 chord, all right? So I'm going to have like the root in some order or other, like that. Okay, that'd be really bare bones. I don't have the 5th in there. Now I do. Now, the thing about this, it's so kind of strange to hear, is this. Okay, you can see here that we've got a compound minor second. And, you know, one way around that would be for us to put this note, the 11th, down on the bottom, okay? And then the 3rd up on top, which would give us like, and it's a really pretty sound, but it's not what we mean by 13, okay? So for now, a 13 is just a dominant chord that also has the 9 and the 13th, all right? So it's got those extras. All right, let's go ahead and spell some of these guys. And we'll get into sus chords and 11th chords perhaps later on. So for now, we're just going to do a C13. Let's do an A flat 13 and E13. All right, so we've got our C, our triad, lowered 7th. All right, and our 9th. So our D. Again, we don't have the 4th or the F in here. Okay, so we just have the A, our 13th. Moving on, the A flat 13. So our A flat major triad, lowered 7th, the 9's included there. It's a B flat. Okay, again, no D flat, but we do have an F natural in there also. And then the E13, E major triad, seventh. That's the lowered 7th, right? Because it's a dominant chord. And then the 9th, that's F sharp. That's supposed to be an F sharp. And then a C sharp, you know, which we'll put up here at the top. Okay, so it just adds a little bit more color, again, to the dominant chords. All right, I'll play one of these for you. So the C13. Okay, if I add the 11th, something like that, which, again, gives us that sort of undesired rub. Okay, again, we'll talk more about suspended chords. All right, so moving on here to the 7 with the sharp 11. This relates to the Lydian dominant chord scale, actually, which comes from melodic minor. So let's go ahead and say that, again, this could either have parentheses or not. Let's do a B flat 7, sharp 11, and a B 7, sharp 11. That'll give us some interesting harmonics and harmonics. All right, so C7 sharp 11, we've got our C. It's just a dominant 7. And then somewhere in there, you know, we're going to have our raised 4th or 11th. Okay, the F sharp, again, you know, it could be that maybe it's, well, maybe it's down there or something like that. All right, the B flat 7 sharp 11. B flat major triad. There's my lowered 7th and an E natural, and then the B 7 sharp 11. Normally, you know, if this were a piece of music, I'd indicate sort of a courtesy accidental right there, just so people don't think that that carries over. But since this is just a little example, I'm not too worried about it. All right, and then the sharp 11 is an E sharp, you know, and you're really going to commonly see E sharps and B sharps respelled enharmonically in jazz. So obviously it just equals an F, okay? But the chord has a special bite to it, the 7 sharp 11, so the C7 sharp 11. I think part of that is just that outlying major 7 interval that we've got. Let me put the other one, B flat. If I drop this sharp 11 down an octave, then we get a rub right there, minor second. Okay, so it does have a real bite to it because of the intervallic relationships of the chord. So one thing Gary Lindsay doesn't get into at this point in the textbook is the idea of suspended chords. You know, this goes back to your classical and traditional theory classes when you talked about, you know, retardations and suspensions. Most commonly, we're talking about the 4th scale degree. So these are chords that are popularized really by Herbie Hancock with his piece Maiden Voyage, and are important in the vocabulary. We'll see more of them in Gary Lindsay's examples later on, but for now, let's go ahead and just create a couple of these things. So let's say we have a C7 sus. Now the sus implies automatically, whether you see it or not in the form of an 11 or in the form of a 4, it automatically implies the fact that we're going to get the 4th or 11th without the 3rd in this dominant chord. So we've got C, F, okay, G, and a B flat like that. And if I were to do this on like F7 sus, and again, sometimes you'll see a 4 or an 11 there. F, not an A, but a B flat, which replaces the A. C, and an E flat up here above. Okay, so they have this kind of a sound to them. Common pop chord, and it really wants to resolve, doesn't it? There, I'll resolve it. Now it's an F dominant 7. Okay, so just a little preview of that. All right, moving on to the C7 flat 9. Now this is coming from diminished harmony, and this is the last one we'll have time for in this video, and then I'll make another video that you can watch. We'll do an A7 flat 9 and an E7 flat 9. All right, so again, just a dominant chord on the bottom and a flat 9 or 2nd scale degree note on the top. A, C sharp, E, G natural, B flat. As I mentioned, this comes right from diminished harmony and the diminished chord scale, which we will talk about. And you can see it on Gary Lindsay's page 193. It's a great page in his book. I wish it were earlier in the text, but look there for chord scales. All right, so we've got our C7 flat 9. Okay, and there's a chord scale that would go with that, which is, okay, it's a diminished scale. It's the half whole version of the diminished scale. Then we've got A7 flat 9. It's really common to see these as 13th chords also, like an A13 flat 9, because we expect that F sharp as a result of that related chord scale. Then we've got the E7 flat 9. Again, real bite to these chords, and it's considered appropriate, correct. This is a perfectly acceptable usage of that dissonance because we've got our root and our flat 9, okay, which are intentional here. All right, we're going to jump to another video here shortly.